Hi, my name is Rebecca, and this is my critique and pitch audio presentation for Photography CIM 413.1. Now, first up, this is just a list of all of the things that I had to involve within this video. I'm not going to go reading through it because it's going to take an eternity, and yeah, feel free to pause it and read all the things I've ticked off for this specific critique and pitch. So, first up, my research. So, around the world, habitats are destroyed on a regular basis, sometimes from natural events such as bushfires, floods, or even storms. However, humans are also responsible for a large chunk of unnatural destruction, destroying forests to make room for more human utilities. And forests are inhabited by several species, and whenever they are destroyed, their homes are almost never replaced, and the animals who previously inhabited these habitats are often killed or rescued with severe injuries. Because of these events, many of our animals have become endangered or extinct. Now, within my local area, the Northern Rivers, we often lose animals to these issues. In our area alone, we have at least 11 endangered species, varying from the well-known koala to our unique common kingfishers. We only have 9% of our remaining native forests that are protected from human logging, and no guaranteed protection from natural disasters to protect these precious animals. However, we do have several wildlife sanctuaries that help maintain and rescue as many of these animals as possible. Some as public as the Macadamia Castle, Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary, and even the Dreamworld Wildlife Park, and some private, such as Wyres, Araucaria Wildlife Sanctuary, and the Five Figs Wildlife Sanctuary. Often these animals rescued can be rehabilitated and released into the wild, but they are often animals who do not survive or have to be kept for life because of their injuries, because if they were released, they would have no chance of survival. Now, I've got two photographers here who I was thinking between and who relate to my essay. So they have similar content, like the animals, the stories behind the animals. But I ended up going with Mark Kriedemann because he has an amazing photographic essay specifically set up for that sort of thing, whereas Steve Parrish goes for the more just clean animal wildlife shots. Anyways, there's those and then what they think of photography, which is very interesting. But straight into it. So this is the essay I chose for this assignment. Red to black to green. A fresh challenge as colour returns to Kangaroo Valley. Now, the aims of this essay, I believe, is to show the loss and recovery of the Black Summer bushfires. It is also to show the magical transformation from black to green in the Kangaroo Valley area in 2020. Now, in first looking at this, there's a lot going on. Like, I gathered the whole essay into a big clump of photos by order from left to right. Now, with my own essay, I think I would want to stick to some sort of colour scheme and a gradient rather than lots of different colours. Like, he starts off with browns, as I'll go through shortly, and heads on towards the greens, but there's still bits everywhere. Now, yeah, as I said, the green, it's scattered everywhere. Like, there's pieces in the front, and then it builds up, and then it's not entirely over the end of the thing, there's a lot going on there. So rather than doing that, for my own photographic essay, I want to start with warm colours and go to cool colours toward the end of it, which will make that story a bit more understandable. Now, for the format. Mark Kriedemann has done all of his main story narrative shots on the left side of his essay, which are all horizontal with the writings under them. And on the right, he has the portrait shots, which have all these smaller portrait shots. Now, as per the brief, I have to stick to one type of photo, so it'll probably be the landscape shots. Excuse me. But yeah, no, this is still pretty cool. Anyway, and alrighty, looking deeper. There's similar themes and subjects to my idea. So Mark Kriedemann goes along with like the animal life and like their destruction and the natural destruction of the bushfires, as well as obviously the human side of things. But he still does have like the trees and the habitats destroyed and even the dead animals, really. And from the colour from brown to green. So I'm hoping to go from red to blue-ish. anyways, these 8 photos I've picked from all of his photos that I think tell the story more than anything, specifically together, but they're still really clear to tell you what's going on individually or the feeling of them. Anyways, first up, this first photograph I believe is the cover shot, which introduces the Kangaroo Valley. This is the first shot in the essay, and its symbolic meaning conveys how green and beautiful the valley was before the fires came in and destroyed everything. And the techniques he uses is asymmetry, eyelines, focus, and exposure. So going into detail on these points, the asymmetry just brings balance to this shot. Like the rock in the right side and the clouds in the left side, the empty part in the right, and like that smallish, that soft part of the terrain in the left. It just balances out the photo so you can feel the peacefulness of the valley, obviously, before everything happened. And if it was incredibly busy, it wouldn't be a very good foresty, like landscapey thing. And I want to be able to use that for my cover photo for when I take my intro shot. Next up, the eye lines. There's specifically 1, maybe 2 eye lines, but the main eye line is the one that goes straight across that horizon line there. Which I guess you could argue it could start on the left side where the clouds are and go to the right, but at the same time your eyes are drawn immediately to the rock and then down toward the right. But that still gives you the same story. Like it's pretty clear how you can look at this picture. And I want to do the same for my cover shot. Have it nice and even and like clear to be like, well, that's a forest, That's what happened before the machines took it. And the focus. So the main focus, I guess, of this image is this rock. So for a landscape photo, everything is in focus. Well, not everything, but mostly in focus. And this would be a great idea. He's probably used a smaller lens for this one, just so everything is balanced, which is another thing that I want to do for my own essay, have a little lens and take a picture of the whole environment rather than just my usual 300mm lens and a little environment. And it just, as I said, it shows peace and the focus of this rock, because it's a different color. It just draws your eye straight in to have a look at what's going on around you. The next one, my favorite of this picture. So the vibrance of this piece is incredible. Now, there could be 1 or 2 options of how the vibrance of this piece came about. The first could be post-editing, but as I have been out and done photos with this photographer before, actually, he likes to do low shutter, high aperture shots. And it brings out the vibrancy in the colors everywhere, and it's insanely amazing. Which I think I want to try and give it a go for this one. I'll have to get a tripod and have the whole thing set up and everything. I have to find a decent place though, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, you can tell because the cloud cover in the right side where the mountain, like where the horizon line is, it almost looks like water. It's just wispy and magical, and that's what the low shutter speed, high aperture shot does, and the vibrance of that top right corner. It almost looks like the vibrance has been shot out of like beyond anything, but that compared to the green, you can tell that it matches. So I reckon it was a low shutter, high aperture. Anyways, continuing on. The next photos are a matchup pair because they're kind of the same sort of thing. They feel like environmental shots. So this establishes what's happened in the valley and why. You can straight up go, hey, there was a bushfire there because there's fire still in the trees and, things have been blown up and everything. So you can tell what's happened, and it's the environment of the wild and the house of the person, whoever lived there. Anyways, the symbolic message, as I was saying, is how they reveal what the fires did to these places. Now, the techniques used here are the rule of thirds, focus, eyelines, and colour. Now, the rule of thirds very important in any storytelling thing, basic storytelling, is the rule of thirds. So each important object is obviously placed in a specific part of the rule of thirds. The first one is really good because the trees that are still on fire, the darker trees, are on the left side, even in the middle and on the bottom left. Whereas everything that's already been charred and is already dead and brown and gross is on the right side. So it kind of has a clear shot of where you're looking. And then on the second one, the toasted oven is in that line on the left side in those two bars. So it's still within that range. Now this helps you look straight at the story. And so I really want to involve this sort of thing in my own essay so you can be like, hey, that's clear, that's balanced, let's look at, oh, yep, that's good, sort of thing. All right, and then the focus, again, the focus is on those things that are in the main parts of the rule of thirds. The tree that's on fire still, and that toasted oven. It draws your eye immediately in so that you can be like, hey, that's what's happening. And yes, I want to use that for my own photographic essay. The eyelines are the top one not so clear, but it's still that horizon line. You look from the left because the trees are on fire, and then you go down toward the right. It's not a clear one, but it's still pretty understandable. And then the one with the oven, you can tell that the lines of the shop or the house go inward from the dark in the outside and inward toward that outside section in the house, like the doorway or whatever. And you can just tell the feeling of that, and it's not, again, as direct as some shots, but it's still very clear where the photographer wants you to look. And I really want to be able to do that in my own photographic essay. One of the things that I want to think about doing is having somebody look in a birdcage, and so your eye is following that eye line down the cage, and maybe some animals will be in the front of the cage, or it'll be an interesting shot to see if I can get. And the color. Obviously, both of these look like something's happened. It's brown, it's sad, it's chaos, I guess would be the better word for it. You can tell what happened. So, and you go take this picture away from someone and just give them to someone and they'll be like, yes, there was a fire. Whether it was the same fire, they wouldn't know. But you can tell a fire or if something blew up in this situation, which is what I want in my story, to be able to tell people to be able to tell that that's what happened to that place. Anyways, the next shot, I think, would be the close-up shot. So it helps the viewers feel the impact of the narrative. So in this case, the fires. The symbolic meaning being that this animal can pretty much escape most things. I mean, especially if it was a kangaroo, you can't really tell. And so the fires must have been that bad that these animals could not escape, which is really sad. By that, this photo has a lot in it. Now, the techniques used are the rule of thirds, the focus, the asymmetry, and color that were really well in this shot. Now, the rule of thirds is definitely always important. They used it here by putting the skull in the bottom left and everything else everywhere else. They've also got that foreground part of the ground in the bottom half of the shot, which is very interesting. And I think I could use this to my advantage for maybe like the machines or an animal with a handler or something like that. It would be really cool. Anyways, and focus. Obviously, the focus is that skull and that foreground aspect, that not quite in the front there, but like that middle part where that skull is sitting, and everything else is blurred. So the aperture here would probably be close to 4 or 6. It really depends on his camera, but that is the main focus, and that you can tell that is the main focus. And it's a scary thing. It's a skull. It's a dead animal, which helps our emotion be followed over to the viewer when they're looking at it. And I really want to be able to do this in my own essay. Now, the asymmetry of this photo is great because you've got the skull on the left side and like all the trees and the burnt debris and stuff carrying on to the right side. So again, it's that balance where the you know, it just helps tell that story really nicely. And the color, obviously you can tell it's a sad, hot, maybe not hot, it feels cold, but it could be just because it's cold in my room right now, but you know what I mean. The oranges and just the browns and the death, it just, you know, something bad's happened here. You know it's not great. And I really want to be able to portray those feelings in my story. Next up, we have a bit of a lighter note, but a sadder note, I guess, at the same time, is the establishing shots, which are a couple shots with people in them. There's a building that the symbolic meaning is it's just empty. The fires have caused people to go away. The tourism is really bad. And the second one is the people are trying to help the wildlife. They're filling the containers on the trees with food and water for the wildlife to try and help rehabilitate the ones that they obviously can't catch or whatever. The ones that need help but don't need to be brought in. The techniques used here would be the eyelines, the color, and the depth of field. Now, the eyelines, it's more so on the first photo, but it's an interesting thought on the second photo, is straight up that shop. You go from this end where it says takeaway meals and the lights, all the way up toward that person and beyond, because the person is looking out there, and that's really cool. Again, I want to kind of do something like that with the cages and the people with maybe a bird on their arm or something like that. The second one is more interesting because there's multiple, like you could look straight across the picture and not like register much. You could register the dog, person, or whatever, but if you really look at it, the dog's looking up at the lady, so you'd look at the dog's eye line to the lady who's filling up the thing, looking down at the person on the phone, and then you go straight across the screen again, which is very interesting. The complex eye lines are really fun, but really difficult. And I'll see what I can do in that aspect. Now the colour, again, you can tell it's the same essay because the colour is that brown, I guess, it's not sepia, but that brownish-esque look, and it matches. And so you know that something bad has happened in these shots. And it works. And like that, she's wearing blue, which brings her straight out of the shot. And I reckon it'd be really cool to be able to do that and have like the orange and warmer shots at the beginning of my photographic essay, and then the colder shots as the birds and things and animals are in the cages in the second shot, the second part of it. And the depth of field, these shots are all like landscape shots, so everything's in focus, which would be really good for like the establishing shots to show where the environment show what's happening, show where everything's happening for this story sort of thing. So I would want to use this in my own essays. So maybe like shoot the sanctuary or shoot a cafe at the sanctuary and have something that establishes where this is happening, why these animals are ending up where they're ending up. And the last two, I believe, these photos would represent the closing shots. Now, the symbolic meaning behind these shots are they feel-good shots. You feel good when you look at this. There's a sun, there's greenery. I mean, the top one has a house, like a happy new day sort of thing. Brand new day feeling. And, you know, for this example, it would show that the brightness, the happiness when everything was over, everyone had recovered. Like the trees in the second image are all burnt trees with just life, new life surrounding them, and the sun coming straight through, which looks really cool and helps employ that narrative. And the lighting, the techniques used is the lighting, the simplicity, the eye lines, and the color and saturation. As I was saying, the lighting is an amazing thing to play with. Like the light just tells you it's a happy thing or a good thing or even dangerous thing. But for this instance, it would be happy because there's so much green. And it just looks like a star in the sun. Like, you know, it just looks bright and happy and cheery. And it would also look, you know, dangerous, really. Like if you were to highlight something, the sun highlights that kind of light highlights things. So if I had a machine and the light was like shining down on that machine, be like, look at that thing, look at that specific point in that picture. So it'd be really cool to experiment with on my own photographic essay. And the simplicity of these shots, I don't have to tell anybody what these shots are. You can just be like, yep, that's a new life sort of photo. There's greenery, there's grass, and it's beautiful. And I want to be able to do that with my own essay. You don't need work. I don't want to need words to explain that to the people who are looking at it. The eye lines are pretty obvious. Straight. The first one, you kind of follow the path because it's a set-up thing toward the house and toward the sunlight. The second one, I find I just kind of look at the sun from any direction of the bottom of this picture because it's the brightest point in the picture. So you just kind of look in. It's not really a line per se, but it's still like a point in which you look directly at. And I really like this. And the saturation and the color is incredible. Like the greens, really bringing in that green for those shots. And I want to be able to do that with the blues and the like the yellows at the beginning of my story. Now how this critique will inform my approach to my own photographic essay. In looking at all of these things, I want to figure out how I can use color to change my photographic essay and the emotions involved in it from warm to cool, I mean. The perspective, I want to try a variety of different perspectives so that you can tell the story in more than one way. Quantity, unlike this photographic essay, I'll be keeping to a maximum of 12 images as a whole, because that's what the brief says. The format, I have to stick to one thing, and that one thing I've picked is horizontal and landscape with full color. I will be considering the concept of asymmetry and symmetry so that I can involve my narrative better. I will be using the compositional theory rule of thirds so that I keep my photos balanced. I'll use close-up shots to exaggerate certain parts of the story, like a bird or sadness, that sort of thing. I will be taking careful consideration on how focused and my use of depth of field is when I'm taking all these photos. I want to be able to use eyelines to tell the story. Exposure to muck around with lighting and everything would be really fun, like low shutter, high aperture shots. And post-production, I plan on using full color, and I'm unsure how I want to edit my photos, but it will likely be just the sharpness and maybe up and down the vibration, the radiance, the lights and all that sort of thing, but not so much anything else. But I will still probably muck around with the concept of going black and white, but I haven't decided yet. Anyways, my pitch. What I plan on making. My synopsis to my pitch is pretty simple. A photographic story about one of the many possibilities a wild animal could lose its home to some sort of disaster and how that animal could end up. The aims of my essay is to make people aware of what happens to the animals who do survive natural and unnatural disasters. And the essay aims to show the impact of habitat destruction. Now, this is just a quick look over what my plans are. I'm not going to read into it just because I'm running out of time. I've already ran out of time. But it's just a little setup of some plans I want to go over when I'm taking shots. And this is some of the shots I've already taken, but I'll probably change that. That's just what I have already. But I have one more shoot to do before I can guarantee what I want yet. So we'll see how that goes. Now, my rationale, why is my story worth telling? Animals are wonderful and amazing creatures, especially our iconic and rare natives. If we do not protect their homes and their lives, they'll become extinct like the Tasmanian tiger. And no one will ever see them again. They'll just become stories and maybe even myths. On the other side of things, without certain animals, the ecosystems will become out of whack and cause serious repercussions to our local environments. If one species goes extinct, it'll most likely cause a chain of extinctions, which is not fun, not good. Now, why did I choose this subject on a personal level? Animals have been a part of my life since before I can remember. I have personally been involved with animals literally forever. I have household pets. I've always had household pets. Watched all kinds of animal shows, cartoon, non-cartoon. Read animal books, again, novels and information books. I've followed vets online. I've gone to many zoos and sanctuaries, watched animal documentaries, and I've also studied animal courses throughout TAFE. For a long time, I actually wanted to be a vet or a wildlife carer. So it made animals a part of my life. Now, the thing in saying that, each animal has an important role in our ecosystem. And if we lose them, then we're probably going to lose our ecosystem. We're not going to have animals ever again. We're just going to be in a colourless world, and it's going to be boring. And having these poor animals end up in domestic care, that's the most we're ever going to see of them. They're never going to see wild again, which is not great. It's really not a great emotional thing. Now, throughout thinking about these events that continue occurring to local wildlife, I wanted to pursue creating a photographic essay to portray a part of this narrative. So the story of what happens to these animals when they get something happen to them, like an unnatural disaster, specifically. Now, the perspectives of this chosen topic. The concept of this topic can be very controversial, as there are multiple sides to this argument. There are those who believe zoos and sanctuaries take animals just for money and trophies, not just for rehabilitation, like in the olden days. There are those who believe animals should not be in cages no matter what happened to them, including the possible extinction. And those that believe this is the best way to maintain our species population. It's a very two-sided coin moment. The detailed analysis of logistics and location. Locations will vary so that I can tell the intended story. This is due to the current COVID outbreak and border restrictions. The intended plan is to take pictures of human work sites around my area during golden hour, so 4 p.m. to 5 p.m, to portray the destruction of animal habitats. Then go to local wildlife sanctuaries around the area to get several angles and views of life in a cage. However, due to lockdown, I only have access to one sanctuary, which is Macadamia Castle, so I'll hopefully be able to take photos of the animals being handled, watched, and generally in cages. Now, my intended subtext is if humankind continues to destroy habitats, this will cause us to lose many of our species. Even if these species survive, they'll never again have the opportunity to experience the freedom of being wild again due to their extreme injuries and just be watched by people in cages. Like, they'll be in cages, maybe have some flight time, but that'll be about it. It'll be a pretty boring life for that poor animal. Now, the ethics involved through the processes and themes. The concept of sanctuaries and zoos is already an ethical battle, as I've discussed. Taking photos in different locations and combining them can be unethical because it's not the same place, not the same story, but in COVID-19 it's a little bit hard to portray the same story through the same location. This type of photo essay can be encouraged to think of either side of the coin, whether caged or uncaged. So people can be mad at me for taking pictures of the birds in the cages, or they can be mad at me for portraying it in... There's a whole thing there with political stuff. Anyways, my influences throughout my life, really. These people have helped me understand why animals are important, their beauty, their personalities, and their uniqueness. So David Attenborough, I don't know if you've heard of him, has enlightened me on the wonder and colour of animal life across the world and their life. Like, they're amazing. The things that they do that we don't know they do. Just the documentaries are insane. Anyways, Dr. Harry and Dr. Chris are both vets that I've watched on TV forever. They've educated me through TV shows on animal personalities and how to care for certain animals depending on things that happen to them or just general living. Steve Parrish is the wildlife photographer that I've looked up to for a long time because his photos are amazing. And of course, I can't miss out on Steve Irwin because he was inspiring as all heck before he died, obviously. And I did enjoy watching his shows, and I even visited the Australia Zoo once with school when I was a kid. But there are obviously more and more of these people that I've watched and seen over the years that inspired me into animals. But they're the main 5. And I believe that is all my reference list. But thank you for watching and have a good day.